My name is Laura. I'm a mother of two and married to a good man named Eric who's always been steady when life isn't. We live in a modest home in a quiet town called Havenwood, a good 2 hours drive from the coastal city of Port Blossom, where I grew up. I visit my parents, Dennis and Marlene, regularly, or at least I used to. Things with them have always been particular. Growing up, my parents weren't exactly affectionate. They were practical, measured, and formal, the kind of people who praised silence more than effort. Love was something shown in perfectly ironed shirts or neatly packed lunches, not in words or hugs. Still, I didn't know any different, so I assumed that was normal. Love, in our house, was a quiet, dutiful thing, a well-oiled machine that ran without the need for sentimental fuel. Now, as an adult, I try to stay in touch, calling once a week, visiting every other month with my children, Thomas and Grace. The visits are polite civil. My mother keeps the conversation to safe topics, the unpredictable coastal weather, the progress of the tomatoes in her garden, what the neighbors are up to. My father mostly reads the paper and asks how my husband's job at the engineering firm is going, not mine. Never mine. Eric says it always feels like we're visiting acquaintances you're trying to impress, and I get it. He's never really been embraced by them. They're not rude, just indifferent in a quiet, unsettling way. They don't ask about the kids' birthdays until after they've passed. My mom once gave Thomas a beautifully illustrated copy of The Wind in the Willows that had another child's name, Leo, written in cursive on the first page, obviously a regift. She laughed and said, "Well, a book's a book, isn't it?" Then there's Ryan, my younger brother. He's the opposite of me, charming, spontaneous, a bit dramatic. He lives just across town from them, in a sprawling new development, so I assume they see each other more often. When they talk about him, their faces light up in a way I've never quite been able to understand. Ryan's planning something big with his new venture, my father said the last time I visited. When I asked what it was, he just shrugged, smiling like it was a delightful secret I wasn't meant to share. I don't think they mean to compare us. At least, I try not to think that. But there's this quiet undercurrent whenever we're all in the same room. I notice how my mother refills Ryan's coffee without asking but lets Eric walk to the kitchen himself to find a mug, how they laugh just a little louder at his stories of sailing trips and investment wins, how they sit a little closer to his kids on the couch. But I've never said anything. I don't believe in stirring the pot. Besides, maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe I'm sensitive. I've told myself that 1,000 times. It wasn't until this past December, just after Thanksgiving, that something happened. Something small, but something I haven't been able to forget. It happened during the first weekend of December. The air was crisp, and the first whispers of Christmas were beginning to scent the town. I had called my mother and asked if we could come by that Saturday afternoon, just for a short visit before things got busy with holiday preparations. She hesitated, a slight, almost imperceptible pause on the line. Then she told me they were having some people over, but we could come for a bit, if we didn't mind. That should have been my first clue. When we pulled up to their immaculate house on Seaglass Lane, it was clear some people meant Ryan's entire family. His sleek black sedan and Vanessa's luxury SUV were both parked in the driveway, gleaming under the weak winter sun. Laughter spilled out from the open front door, a warm, inviting sound that somehow made me feel cold. I looked at Eric, who gave me a small, tight shrug. Inside, the house looked festive. Fragrant cedar garland was draped on the banisters, a cinnamon-scented candle flickered on the mantel, and the beginnings of a magnificent Christmas tree stood in the corner, its branches awaiting their finery. And there they all were, my parents, Ryan, Vanessa, and their 3 kids gathered around the dining table, mugs of hot cider steaming in their hands. "Laura," my mother said, her smile a little too wide, a little too bright. "Oh, you brought the children. How lovely. Do come in." No one stood to greet us. Ryan gave us a quick nod, a king acknowledging his subjects, and continued his story about a skiing trip they had just returned from, some luxurious chalet in Telluride. Vanessa, looking effortlessly chic in a cream cashmere sweater and perfectly styled hair, was laughing as she showed my mother photos from the trip on her phone. I stood there for a second too long, a visitor in a house that was once my home, before ushering Thomas and Grace inside. Eric hung our coats on the rack by the door without a word. My children, thoughtful and observant, hovered near the edge of the room. They knew instantly this wasn't their space. My father gave Thomas a distracted "Hey there, sport," without looking up from a financial newspaper, while Grace, my quiet little shadow, didn't get so much as a glance. Meanwhile, Ryan's youngest, a boisterous boy named Leo, had climbed into our dad's lap with a half-eaten cookie, and my mother was fussing over Vanessa's coat, calling her my elegant girl. I had to blink twice, the phrase so foreign and yet so natural on her lips. I brought out a tin of homemade gingerbread cookies I'd stayed up late the night before to bake, the scent of ginger and molasses a small offering of love. "We baked these together," I said, placing them on the polished side table. My mother barely looked up from Vanessa's phone. "Oh, we've got plenty of sweets, dear." Eric touched my arm gently, his fingers a small point of warmth in the chilly room. "Don't take it personally," he murmured into my ear. But how could I not? Vanessa was now showing off a new bracelet, a delicate gold chain with a single, shimmering diamond. A designer brand I didn't recognize but knew was impossibly expensive. My mother gasped as if she were looking at the crown jewels. "Ryan really spoils you," she giggled, her voice full of admiration. We stayed for an hour, maybe less. I sat on the edge of a stiff armchair in the living room while Eric made polite, strained conversation with my dad about the economy. My kids tried to play with their cousins, but were quickly excluded from some game involving expensive new tablets they'd all been gifted. No one really noticed when we decided to leave. As we gathered our coats, Ryan called out a cheerful "See ya," without turning around. In the car, the silence was heavy. Thomas, his small voice filled with a hurt he didn't understand, finally asked, "Mom, did we do something wrong?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and shook my head, my eyes fixed on the darkening road. "No, sweetheart, not at all." That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of my mother looking at Vanessa, as though she were some queen to be honored, echoed in my mind. And the way she had completely ignored Grace's quiet questions about the half-decorated tree. It was more than indifference, it was dismissal. I wasn't imagining things anymore. The quiet undercurrent had finally become a wave, and I was struggling to keep my head above water. A few days after that visit, a voicemail from my mother appeared on my phone. Her tone was uncharacteristically soft, almost hesitant. "Hi Laura, it's your mother. I didn't want to bother you, but your father's old sedan is making that rattling noise again, and you know how he is, he won't go to the garage without a push. We just don't have the extra at the moment, with the holidays coming up. If you could help us out a little, we'd be so grateful. No pressure, of course. Call me when you can." I sat with the phone in my hand for several minutes before calling Eric into the room. He listened silently to the replayed message, his expression unreadable. Finally, he asked, "Do you know how much they need?" "No," I replied, staring out at the bare branches of the oak tree in our backyard. "But I'll find out." This wasn't the first time. Over the years there had been small, delicate requests, for the water heater that gave out in the middle of winter, for a series of expensive prescriptions for my father's blood pressure, once even for their golden retriever's emergency vet surgery. It was always phrased gently, never a direct demand, but the expectation was always there. And I always helped. Not out of a sense of obligation, but because I believed that's what a daughter does. You care for the people who raised you. At least that's what I believed. Still, something about this one rubbed at my already raw feelings. I knew Ryan and Vanessa had money. Not just doing fine money. They had a vacation home in a gated lake community, luxury cars, and hired a service to decorate their house for Christmas. Ryan ran some kind of boutique investment firm that I didn't fully understand, and Vanessa seemed to glide through life on a cloud of designer handbags and silk scarves. Why did our parents come to me? Why did they ask the daughter who clipped coupons, bought her clothes on sale, and took freelance bookkeeping jobs between laundry cycles and school runs to make ends meet? I didn't ask. I never did. Instead, I quietly logged into my online banking and transferred $1,500 to my father's account. Then I sent my mother a simple text message, "Hope this helps with the car. Let me know if you need anything else." The reply came almost instantly. "You're a blessing, Laura, truly." "Thank you, sweetheart." It was the first time my mother had called me sweetheart in years. That one word, simple as it was, thawed a little piece of the ice that had formed around my heart. Maybe things were changing. Maybe that awful visit and those cold glances had meant nothing after all. Maybe they were just distracted by their glamorous guests. Maybe the holidays were stressing them out, and I had, as I so often told myself, taken it too personally. It was only early December. Christmas plans hadn't been formally discussed yet, but I was sure, absolutely certain, that we would be invited. There was always enough food, always room. And after this, after helping again without a single question, my parents would surely want the whole family together. That weekend, feeling a renewed sense of hope, I baked a batch of spiced apple muffins, my father's favorite, and mailed them to Port Blossom with a handwritten card from Grace and a crayon doodle of a snowman from Thomas. I felt hopeful again. Later that night, I looked over our budget, adjusting a few grocery categories and postponing a planned purchase to make up for the unexpected transfer. Eric didn't complain. He rarely did. He just came up behind me, kissed my forehead, and said, "You're doing more than your share, Laura. I hope they see it." I smiled, but my chest tightened. I hoped they did too. The week before Christmas, our house in Havenwood was filled with that special kind of chaos I had come to love. Eric was on the floor in the living room, wrestling with wrapping paper and tape, while Thomas and Grace huddled at the dining table, diligently drawing Christmas cards for their teachers. Our modest tree sparkled in the corner, smelling of pine, and a tray of cinnamon buns cooled by the kitchen window, their sweet scent mingling with the crisp winter air. "Did you get the photo book printed?" I asked Eric, wiping flour from my hands. He nodded, holding up a beautifully wrapped square parcel, bound with twine, labeled and ready to go. It had become our tradition, a small hardcover book filled with photos from our year, the kids' birthdays, school plays, muddy hikes in the state park, messy pancake breakfasts, and quiet, sweet moments. I poured hours into arranging the pages, choosing the right captions. It wasn't just a gift. It was a way of saying, "Here's our life. We want to share it with you. Please see us." I thought we could drive down Christmas Eve morning, I said, mostly to myself as I planned aloud. "Stay until the 26th. I'll bring the pies and maybe that cranberry chutney your mom likes." Grace piped up from the table, her face bright with excitement. "Can we wear our matching sweaters? The ones with the reindeer?" "Of course, sweetie," I said, smiling at her. "Grandma will love it." I hadn't yet spoken to my mother about the specific plan, but Christmas had always been an unspoken assumption. We'd done it every year, even during the worst snowstorms, even when Grace had a fever one year and we had to turn back halfway. We were always expected, always welcome, even if our reception was never as enthusiastic as I hoped it would be. So when the phone rang that evening, I picked it up without a moment's hesitation, expecting to finalize our arrival time. My mother's voice came through the line, clear and pleasant. "Laura, I just wanted to check. Are you still planning to come this Christmas?" My heart lifted. "Yes, of course. We were thinking of coming on the 24th and staying a couple of nights." I made that photo book again, and the kids are so excited to show you their reindeer sweaters. I thought we'd bring pies and... Oh, my mother interrupted, the single word sharp enough to cut through my cheerful chatter. "I see. Well, Ryan and Vanessa are bringing their friends this year, a lovely couple they vacationed with in Aspen. They'll be staying over, and with all the kids, it's just going to be too much. The house will be full." I went quiet, the words catching in my throat. My mother filled the sudden, Vast silence with a soft, dismissive chuckle. You know how loud it gets, and there's only so much space. We'd be sleeping people in the study as it is. But we always come, I managed to whisper, my voice sounding small and foreign to my own ears. I know, sweetheart, but it's just not possible this year. It's going to be a tight squeeze as it is. I blinked, staring at the cheerful, twinkling lights on our tree, which suddenly felt mocking. I forced a smile into my voice, a habit born of years of practice. Right. Of course. I understand. My mother sighed, a sound of relief. Maybe we can do something in January, just us girls. Something inside me twisted at those words, just us girls. An empty promise, a placating gesture. I wasn't even sure what that meant anymore. After the call ended, I stood motionless in the middle of the living room, staring at the pile of carefully wrapped gifts on the couch. The photo book, Our Year in Pictures, sat on top. Eric looked over at me from his nest of wrapping paper, and he instantly knew something was terribly wrong. We're not going, I said quietly, my voice flat. They don't have room. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the crinkling of paper in Eric's hands. Then Thomas, who had been standing in the doorway, asked, "But Grandma said we could come last year. Did she forget?" I shook my head slowly, the movement feeling heavy and deliberate. "No, sweetheart," I said, meeting his confused gaze. She didn't forget. That night, I stayed up long after everyone else had gone to bed. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold, the colored lights of the Christmas tree reflecting softly in the dark window. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I simply sat, staring at the phone, waiting to feel something, anything other than this dull, heavy, soul-crushing disappointment. It felt like a door had been quietly but firmly closed in my face, and I was finally starting to realize it had been locked for a very long time. 3 days before Christmas, the house was quieter than usual. The decorations still sparkled, the cookies still cooled on the counter, but the spirit had dulled, like a light bulb losing its power. Grace asked if we were going to Grandma's every morning, her hopeful little face a fresh pang of hurt, and every time I gave her a soft, non-committal answer, I couldn't bear to say the truth out loud. Then the phone rang again. I stared at the screen for a moment. Mom. I almost let it go to voicemail, almost. But after taking a deep, steadying breath, I answered. "Hi, Mom." My mother launched straight into it, her voice brisk. "Laura, I hate to ask again, I really do, but your father's back has been acting up terribly and we're thinking of getting one of those special recliners that supports his posture, something orthopedic. We found one on sale, but, well, you know how tight things are right now." I closed my eyes, a slow-motion dread washing over me. A pause stretched between us, thick with unspoken meaning. Finally, I said quietly, "You mean you want me to pay for it?" My mother hesitated, just for a second. "Only if you're able, sweetheart. You know we wouldn't ask if it weren't important." I pressed my fingers into my temple, a headache blooming behind my eyes. "I gave you money for the car 2 weeks ago. $1,500. I know, and we're so grateful for that, we truly are." "No," I said, the word escaping before I could stop it. "You're not. You didn't even have room for us at Christmas." Another pause. My mother's voice, when it came back, was distinctly cooler. "Laura," I explained the situation. "The house is full, with Ryan's friends." My voice was shaking slightly now, a tremor of long-suppressed anger. "Not just his family, his friends. We weren't just an afterthought, Mom. We weren't even a consideration." My mother bristled, her tone defensive. "Ryan works very hard. He has a lot on his plate. He needs this break." So do I. The dam inside me finally broke. "But you don't care about my plate. You never do. You never ask how we're managing if we need a break. You just call when you need something, and I send the money. I always send the money." "You're being dramatic," my mother said flatly, her voice like ice. "No," I said, my voice suddenly low and steady. "I'm being honest." For the first time, there was a long, ringing silence. Then my mother sighed, a slow, deliberate sound that I knew was meant to convey her profound disappointment in me. Look, Laura, I know you're upset, but this is the truth. Ryan brings joy when he visits. You bring stress. You have always taken things too personally. My lips parted in disbelief. I couldn't breathe. And yes, she continued, her voice gaining a cruel momentum, we love Ryan's family more. They make us feel alive. They have exciting stories to tell. They don't complain. Vanessa is always so polished and cheerful, and their kids are full of such wonderful energy. When you come, it's like walking on eggshells. You're always watching us, always waiting for something to be wrong. I swallowed hard against the acid rising in my throat. You don't ask Ryan for money, do you? My mother didn't answer. The silence was her confession. You ask me, I said, the realization landing with the force of a physical blow, because you know I won't say no. Another silence. I don't ask Ryan, she finally said, her voice sharp with indignation, because I don't want to burden him. He has a family to support, a business to run. You, well, your life is simpler. And frankly, Laura, if it weren't for us, you wouldn't have what you do. We helped you when you were starting out. You owe us more than you seem to remember. I felt as if someone had dropped a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I owe you. Her voice was sharp now, cutting. Yes, you wouldn't have finished college without our help or gotten that first decent apartment. Don't pretend we haven't done our part. So yes, when we ask for a bit of help now, we expect you to step up. That's what family does. I don't know how long I sat there after the call ended. My tea had gone cold again. The lights blinked lazily on the tree, oblivious. Eric came into the room and froze when he saw my face. Laura? I shook my head, unable to form a full sentence. I managed to choke out the words. She said they love Ryan's family more, and that I owe them for everything I have. Eric didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just came and stood beside me, a solid, unwavering presence. I stood up and picked up the wrapped parcel containing the photo book. I walked it over to the fireplace, where a low fire was burning. For a moment I hesitated, my fingers tracing the smooth paper. Then slowly I tore the wrapping off, opened the cover, and looked at the smiling faces inside, my children, my husband, our life, and I tossed it into the flames. The pages curled, blackened, and disappeared into ash. In the days that followed, I didn't call my mother. I didn't check in. I didn't send a Merry Christmas text. For the first time in my adult life, there was nothing between us but silence. But my mother didn't stay quiet for long. 2 mornings before Christmas, the phone rang again. I let it ring. A minute later it rang again, and then again. By the 3rd call, I turned the phone face down on the table. The 4th time, I answered, more out of a weary desire for it to stop than any real interest. My mother's voice came through, falsely chipper. Laura, I was wondering when you'd stop sulking. I said nothing. She continued, oblivious to my silence. Look, I've been thinking. Maybe you could come after all. Just you. Leave Eric and the kids with his side of the family for the day or something. You could stay in the little guest room. Vanessa wouldn't mind switching rooms with the girls. She kept talking, but her words blurred into a meaningless buzz. She was offering me crumbs from a table I wasn't welcome at. I just think, she went on, her tone turning patronizing, that it would do some good to have a change of scenery. Clear your head. Spend some time with people who care about you. People who care about me? I said quietly, the words tasting like ash. Yes, Laura. You're not yourself lately. I think all the stress of raising children and managing the house is making you sensitive. I stood up, my heart thudding in my chest, but my voice came out steady and clear. You want me to abandon my husband and my children on Christmas so I can come and grovel for a bed in a house that was already promised to your favorite child and his guests? You can't be serious. I'm not coming. Not now, not later. You made your choice and I've finally made mine. My mother huffed, a small, indignant sound. I was offering you an olive branch. No, I said, the truth finally sharp and clean in my own mind. You were offering me humiliation. Again, before she could reply, I hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand for a moment, then, with slow, deliberate movements, I opened my banking app and canceled the small but steady monthly transfer I'd been sending to my parents for the past 4 years. Eric came into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Everything okay? I'm done, I said, turning to face him. I'm not sending another cent, not another favor, not another explanation. He didn't ask for details. He only walked up behind me and wrapped his arms around my shoulders, holding me tight. Good, he whispered into my hair. I've been waiting for you to say that. That evening, I gathered Thomas and Grace and sat them down in the living room. The tree lights blinked gently behind us, casting soft, dancing colors on the walls. I know we're not going to Grandma and Grandpa's this year, I began, my voice soft but firm, and I know that's different, but that doesn't mean we can't have the most beautiful Christmas right here. Grace looked worried. Will we still open presents? Of course, I smiled. And we'll bake sugar cookies, and we'll sing songs, and maybe if we're lucky, your dad will try to play carols on that old guitar he never learned. Thomas giggled, and Eric raised a hand in mock protest from the couch. We'll make our own magic, I said, looking from one of my children's faces to the other. Right here. Just us. It wasn't the Christmas I had planned. It wasn't the Christmas I had wanted for so long. But as I tucked my children into bed that night and kissed them on their foreheads, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, maybe even years. Peace. A quiet, steady, and profound peace. And that feeling, I was beginning to understand, was worth everything. The days after Christmas were quiet in our home, but not empty. They were filled with a gentle, unhurried rhythm. There were board games played by candlelight during a brief power outage, mismatched pajamas worn long into the afternoon, and laughter over burnt gingerbread men that we decorated anyway. Eric read books by the fire, and the kids turned a collection of cardboard boxes into an elaborate fort city that took over the entire living room. It was calm. It was simple. It was ours. I didn't think much about my parents or Ryan during those days. I didn't go looking for updates on social media, and I muted the group family message thread I was still reluctantly a part of. The silence from their end was absolute. But on the 29th of December, while scrolling through a recipe blog for a New Year's Eve dessert, I accidentally tapped on a suggested for you profile that brought me directly to Ryan's public page. I froze. The top photo was a wide shot of my parents' living room, looking like a page from a magazine, beautifully lit, immaculately decorated. My father was sitting in the middle of the couch, a glass of red wine in his hand, with Ryan beside him and Vanessa perched elegantly on the armrest. My mother was smiling in the background, holding Ryan's youngest daughter on her hip, her face glowing with a pride I had never seen directed at me. The caption read, "Grateful for family. There's nothing more important." My stomach twisted into a tight knot. Against my better judgment, I kept scrolling. There was a video of everyone singing carols around the piano, my mother's voice clear and happy. A shot of a snowball fight in the backyard, my father laughing as one of Ryan's sons pelted him with snow. And then, a short video clip of my mother raising a glass for a toast. To having the whole family under one roof. Finally, she said, her eyes shining. That word, whole, burned through me. There was no mention of me. No mention of my children. It was as though we didn't exist, as though our branch of the family tree had been neatly sawed off. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I picked up, Ryan's voice came through, light and casual as always. "Hey sis, long time." I didn't respond right away, just listened to the hum of the line. "Listen," Ryan continued, his tone shifting slightly. "Mom asked me to call. She's been a bit confused about how long you plan on being upset, over the whole Christmas thing." "Is that what she called it?" I asked calmly. "The whole Christmas thing. Well, yeah, Ryan chuckled, as if I were being difficult. She said you've always been sensitive, that it's not worth holding on to. I sat down at my kitchen table, letting his words settle in the silence between us. You saw the photos, right? Ryan added, his voice full of brotherly bonhomie. It was a great night. Everyone was so relaxed for once. Vanessa said it felt like a proper family again. My throat tightened. Ryan, do you even hear yourself? There was a pause. What do you mean, a proper family? I echoed, my voice dangerously quiet. Because we weren't there? Ryan sighed, a sound of weary impatience. Come on, Laura, don't twist everything. You know how hard Mom tries and Dad isn't getting any younger. She doesn't need this drama. This drama. I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts. You mean me asking not to be excluded from my own family? You weren't excluded, exactly, he backpedaled. There just wasn't room. There wasn't room for us, but there was room for your friends from Aspen. There was room for games, for toasts about having the whole family under one roof. Except we weren't under it, were we, Ryan? We weren't even mentioned. It's like we were erased. Ryan went quiet. Then, trying to smooth it over, he said, Look, maybe next year you can come early or stay at a hotel or something. Mom just didn't want any stress. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You know what, Ryan? She got what she wanted. No stress, no Laura, and no reminders of the parts of the family that aren't shiny and perfect and successful. That's not fair, he mumbled. No, what's not fair, I cut in, my voice sharp and final, is that I spent years helping them quietly while you were off on sailing trips, that I showed up every time I was asked and still wasn't good enough, and that now I'm being told by you to just get over it because you all had a nice holiday. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. I didn't call to fight. No, I said, the clarity of it all washing over me. You called because she didn't want to, and because she thought maybe I'd cave if you played the peacemaker. He stayed silent. Tell her, I added, my voice devoid of anger now, only a calm finality, that I'm not upset. I'm finished. And with that, I hung up. I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I didn't even sigh. I just looked out the window where Thomas and Grace were building lopsided snowmen with Eric, their laughter echoing in the cold air, and I thought, this is my family now. This is the whole family. January rolled in with cold mornings and quiet evenings. I didn't call my parents for New Year's, nor did I receive any message from them. The silence was no longer painful. It was just space. And in that space, I began to feel something that resembled clarity, like a fog lifting from a landscape I'd lived in my whole life. But not everyone stayed silent. The campaign began subtly. It started with a message from my Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister. A simple text, your mother says you've been distant. She's heartbroken. Family matters more than anything, Laura. A few days later, my cousin Linda called, just to chat. Within 10 minutes, the conversation circled inevitably to the same point. You know your mom. She does everything she can. She's not perfect, but who is? Maybe it's time to just let it go. Life's too short to hold grudges. I listened politely, my heart rate steady, and then changed the subject. It was clear what was happening. My parents weren't calling directly. They were using others as messengers, deploying flying monkeys armed with subtle manipulation disguised as loving concern. They were pushing just enough guilt to make me question myself, but not enough for them to have to take any responsibility for their own words. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, my name and address written in my mother's neat, almost clinical script. No return address. We don't understand why you're choosing to estrange yourself from your family, it began. After all we've done for you, we find your behavior hurtful and baffling. We've given you everything you have. The roof over your head today is, in part, because of us. You may not like how we live our lives or who we prefer to spend our time with, but that is not your place to judge. You have responsibilities to us, Laura. You are our daughter. That still means something, whether you like it or not. There was no mention of my children, No mention of Eric, no apology, no acknowledgement of my feelings. Just obligation dressed as tradition, love replaced with debt. I read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in a wooden box in my closet. The same box that held my first report cards, a dried corsage from my high school prom, and a single birthday card from my mother dated 2006. A museum of a relationship that had long since expired. Then, on a gray Sunday afternoon in February, my phone rang. Mom. I stared at the screen for a long time. For the first time since all of this had started, my mother was calling me directly. I stepped outside onto the cold back porch before answering, needing the crisp air to ground me. Hello. My mother's voice was cold, but restrained. Well, it's been a while. Yes, I said calmly. It has. You didn't call for New Year's. It was a statement, not a question. No, I didn't. You didn't reply to my letter. I received it, I replied, my voice steady. There wasn't anything to respond to. A beat of silence. My mother's tone shifted, not soft, not warm, but calculated. Your father's been unwell. We might need some help again with some medical bills. Nothing serious, just some expenses that piled up unexpectedly. I closed my eyes, a familiar weariness washing over me. There's also been a bit of confusion in the family, she continued, her voice gaining a slight edge. People are asking what's happened to you. Why you've turned on us like this. I haven't turned on anyone, I said, my voice finding a new strength. I've just stopped pretending things are fine when they're not. My mother exhaled slowly, a long-suffering sigh. You have always been so dramatic. No, I said, the word clear and certain. I've always been quiet. That's different. There was silence on the line. She tried a new tack. You're our daughter, Laura. You owe us at least a conversation. I'm giving you one now, I said. But I'm not giving you money, not anymore. And I'm not giving you pieces of myself in exchange for being tolerated. Is that how you see it? She asked, her voice laced with disbelief. It's how it's always been, I replied softly. I just didn't want to see it before. My mother scoffed faintly. And what is it you want now? I looked out at my children playing in the melting snow, Eric laughing as he helped Grace pack a snowball. I want peace, I said. And I want my children to grow up in a home where they never have to wonder if they're enough. My mother didn't reply. The silence said more than words ever could. I hope Dad gets better, I added, and I meant it. I do. But I won't be stepping back into a role that was only ever convenient for you. You're making a terrible mistake, my mother said quietly, her last attempt to reclaim control. No, I said, a sense of profound calm settling over me. I'm correcting one. Then I hung up. This time, I didn't sit in silence. I walked back inside, poured myself a hot cup of coffee, and joined my family on the porch. Grace handed me a lopsided snowball with a giggle, and for the first time in years, I smiled without a trace of guilt. The following weeks passed like the slow, hopeful stretch of early spring. The light returned little by little, though the air was still cold. I began noticing small but powerful changes in myself. The way I no longer hesitated to buy myself a bouquet of tulips at the market, how I started journaling again in the quiet mornings, how the house, once filled with the quiet pressure to please others, now felt lighter, freer. I blocked my mother's number, then Ryan's, then my father's. Not out of anger, but as a necessary act of self-preservation. For the first time, I had created a space where their voices couldn't reach me. I didn't announce it, I didn't explain it. I simply stepped away. Eric noticed the difference too. You're sleeping better, he said one morning as I stirred oatmeal for the kids, humming along to the radio. You don't sigh in your sleep anymore. I smiled and kissed his shoulder. I threw myself into small, tangible joys, weekly movie nights with the children, a new coat of pale blue paint in the hallway, taking on a few more bookkeeping clients, but this time on my terms, with clear boundaries. I no longer felt guilty for prioritizing my own well-being. One afternoon in March, while sitting in a small cafe waiting for a client, I saw Ryan's name pop up in my email inbox. The subject line was blank. The body just said, "Hey, can we talk for a moment?" I swear it's not about Mom. Out of a sense of detached curiosity, I agreed. We met at a public park near my home. I chose the location on purpose. No pressure, no corners, just open air and clarity. Ryan looked the same, expensive jacket, confident posture, but there was something different in his expression, a little more careful, a little less sure of himself. He sat on the bench beside me, leaving a respectable distance between us. "I didn't come to fight," he said quickly. I think we owe each other a straight conversation." I waited, saying nothing. "Mom's still upset," he added, "but she's not calling anyone anymore." I think she finally got the message. I raised an eyebrow. That I'm not her insurance policy? He looked down at his polished shoes and let out a short, awkward chuckle. Something like that. I folded my arms across my chest. "Tell me something honestly, Ryan. Did Dad ever get that orthopedic recliner she said he needed?" Ryan shook his head, not meeting my eyes. "No. His back's fine. Always was." I blinked slowly. She lied. I don't know if it was an outright lie or just a guilt tactic. She convinced herself was true, but yeah. He's walking fine, still driving everywhere, still playing cards with his buddies every Thursday. No mention of pain. A quiet, heavy truth settled between us. "And have you given them money lately?" I asked, my voice soft. Ryan looked away across the park. "No. And to be honest, Laura, they've never asked me." I nodded slowly. My stomach didn't twist with sadness this time, but with a profound sense of release. I had known it deep down, but hearing it said out loud was the final, validating piece of the puzzle. "I spent years carrying them," I said, more to myself than to him. Quietly, thinking it made me a good person, thinking that maybe someday they'd finally see me. Ryan didn't answer. "I'm done trying to be seen by people who never wanted to look in the first place," I added. He finally looked at me and nodded, a bit sheepishly. "You look better now," he said. "Lighter." "I am." We didn't hug when we parted. There was no grand speech of reconciliation, just a quiet, mutual nod of understanding. And then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. That evening, I took out my phone and scrolled through old texts and photos, not with pain, but with a quiet sense of finality. I deleted my parents' message thread entirely, then Ryan's. Then I opened a new message and sent it to Eric. "Let's plan something special for Easter. Just us. Our real family." Later, as I tucked the children into bed, Grace whispered sleepily, "Mom, I liked Christmas at home last year. It was so cozy. Can we do it like that again?" I brushed her soft hair back from her forehead and kissed her. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered back. "From now on, it's going to be just like that. Every holiday. Every time." I turned off the light and stood in the hallway for a moment, letting the comfortable silence of our home settle in around me. It wasn't an empty silence anymore. It was full. Full of the life I had chosen, the peace I had claimed, and the quiet, unwavering love I had always deserved.